Welcome to the Being in Medicine show. I'm Corey Anderson.
And I'm Jeff Mars.
Together, we aim to revolutionize the healthcare experience for patients, clinicians, and all team members by unlocking the transformative power of human potential.
Each week, we explore with you and our guests how embracing our authentic selves and choosing who we are being can affect the nature of healing, leading to profound transformations in our lives and in the lives of those around us.
Join us today on a journey through self-discovery and empowerment as we unlock the human potential within each of us. Welcome back to Being in Medicine. Today, we're joined by a guest whose work is transforming how we think about cognitive and mental health across the country. Eric Collett is the CEO of A Mind for All Seasons, a groundbreaking organization dedicated to helping people optimize their brain function and mental wellness at every stage of life. Eric is a nationally recognized speaker, consultant, and expert in brain health. He's also a licensed residential care administrator and educator, teaching at the College of Western Idaho and previously at Boise State University. With over 2 decades of experience, he and his team have developed innovative interventions for dementia care, leadership strategies, and wellness programs that are changing lives. What sets Eric apart is his passionate belief in lifelong learning as a tool for unlocking human potential, something that aligns deeply with our mission here at Being in Medicine. Please join us in welcoming the inspiring and insightful Eric Collett. Thank you, Eric, for coming on today.
Oh, I'm so eager for the conversation, and it's a pleasure to be with both of you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, we're excited to have you. This is a topic that Jeff and I both really enjoy, is the brain function and development and all those things. So tell us what is A Mind for All Seasons? Tell us a little bit about that.
Initially, A Mind for All Seasons was the title of a book that I was writing about the joy of lifelong learning, because I've always been one of those people that just loves to learn about anything in life. When I got to college as an undergraduate, I cracked open the catalog and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble because I want to take all of this stuff. I want to understand all these different things. Yeah. And I'm still like that. But over time, after 9 years ago, I started this company and I felt compelled to name the company A Mind for All Seasons. And I didn't even know all the reasons why. It just seemed like a good idea. And we are leveraging the best science available to help people of all different ages learn fundamental things to help them optimize their cognitive and mental health. And so the name has lots of different meanings now, but I think ultimately, if we have a mind for all seasons, we're trying to show up with dedication and purpose in every interaction and in every season of life. And we're doing things proactively to really take care of one of our most important assets, which is our brain health.
Yeah, that's absolutely wonderful. I was reading about A Mind for All Seasons, and you guys asked this question: why is this happening in the first place? And that's a really great question. And, here we're talking about being in medicine and being from an ontological perspective, shifting our way of being, not just treating symptoms, but how does that impact cognitive healing? How does that play into it?
I think that's a great question. It's a complex question in a lot of ways.
It is.
I mean, we could take it from all sorts of different angles. So maybe I'll just pick one and we'll see where the conversation goes. But yeah, when I think about how I was as a young man in my mid-20s, when I really started working with initially seniors, I stumbled onto a job in an assisted living community. And I thought it was just something I was going to do temporarily while I was interviewing for other jobs and applying to graduate school and all this other stuff. And it became something very different because I began to learn something about being. And I'm not sure that I would have put it in quite those terms at that time, but that's absolutely what was going on.
Yeah.
All of us in life are on this mortal journey. And we all know that there's an endpoint. The elephant in the room for all of us is that the number one cause of death is birth. It's going to happen. But when we're younger, we kind of ignore that fact. And at a young age, I was confronted with death and dying on a daily basis. And at first, I don't think I handled it as well as I could have. It's not that I was melting into a puddle of tears every time I lost someone that I had served professionally and gotten close to. It was more that I started to have a skewed perspective on life and what life meant and what being was. And I found myself looking at friends my age that were in their 20s, and I was thinking, oh, I wonder when you're going to die. And I wonder when you're going to die. And at some point I realized, okay, there is value in showing up and being fully present and aware of one's mortality, that does change us in some positive, productive ways, but it needs to be balanced in a way. And I was imbalanced.
Yeah.
I was almost fixated on the end game of all of it. And I needed to learn to just be centered and fully present in that moment with an appreciation that every moment of every day is unique. It's fragile. It's important. It may be the last moment that we have. We never can tell. So let's make the most of it. But I think ultimately those experiences at a young age with death and dying and recognizing how fragile life is changed me in a positive way that helped me be more intentional in every interaction. And I think being fully present is something that we can always strive for. And it's often lacking in today's society that's just really caught up in distraction.
Yeah. Does your protocols and the programs that you offer, is there a component of presence?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can approach things from a scientific perspective, and we could say, for example, if you're doing breath work, well, in a lot of ways, you're calming an inflammatory response. You're settling the nervous system. You're really focusing in on parasympathetic tone as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system just being revved up. And a lot of us are in such a state of chronic sympathetic dominance.
Absolutely.
Instead of really activating the more the ventral vagus nerve, that, yeah, if you're doing mindfulness, if you're doing meditation, if you're doing box breathing, if you're doing hypoxic breathing exercises, if you're gargling or singing and vibrating the vocal cords, yeah, that's going to have a physiological benefit. But I think there are also benefits when you're doing some of those mindfulness and meditative practices that transcend just the mere physiological explanation of it. There's something at a deeper level that transcends words. And I think that starts to cause some people to become uncomfortable. Some of us as humans want to be able to quantify and explain everything, but certain things in life can only be experienced and understood through experience.
Absolutely.
So I'll give you an example, because a lot of people, I think, have a hard time thinking through this. What about music? I'm a musician. I play the piano, the saxophone, the organ. I started college I was studying to be a reconstructive plastic surgeon, but pre-med wasn't a major. And so I was a piano and saxophone performance major to try to stand out from all the biology guys. And if you know anything about how much time that meant that I spent in the practice rooms on top of the pre-med classes, it's like, oh, this guy's not very smart, because that's not a good design.
I didn't see any of that in the intro.
But if you take music, I can describe very accurately a familiar musical composition. I can say it starts dramatically in the key of C minor with a short, long rhythmic motif. And it represents the composer really wrestling with some setbacks that he had in his life. And it represents fate knocking at the door. And all of that is super accurate in describing the opening of Beethoven's famous Fifth Symphony. But it's nothing like listening to a full orchestra in a live concert play that famous dun, 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 that just sort of reaches out and you have this visceral reaction to it. But the limbic brain, the feeling brain, the emotional part of our being doesn't have any capacity for words. And so you can experience something and you can know it at a very deep level and you can be fully present, but you can't exactly explain it, because some things can only be fully understood through experience. And emotion is one of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Phenomenology, experiencing something, having a lived experience of it can definitely bring all of that forward for a person. And I love how you captured that. That was brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that for clinicians and practitioners and therapists and everybody that's really on the front lines as healthcare professionals, kind of the audience here in this podcast, I think if we go into every interaction with a healthy regard for the fact that some things we'll be able to talk about, some things we'll be able to quantify, some things we might have a really logical explanation for, but some things that we need to sit with and hold space for with the people that we're serving, by nature, transcend language. And if we ignore that fact and we fail to sit with those things, we will never be as fully present with those that we serve as they need for them to have real healing and connection. And sometimes we're in devastating circumstances where there is no physical healing. I've sat with people at death's door, but there's still a powerful moment that occurs when you're willing to sit there and even just be comfortable without talking. Get comfortable with the silence of just being present for someone and holding their hand. And I think it's very easy to become afraid that one will get caught up emotionally and get connected. And I say, well, how can you actually serve someone if you don't get emotionally connected with them on some level? That's why if you are serving people in healthcare, it's a high calling and it's challenging. There's nothing easy about it.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you said there. There's times when language just cannot do us justice in a moment in the presence, and just allowing for space. I think that is something that we've touched on with several of our guests, is creating space for things to show up, for you to be present with another person, and the healing that can occur in that space, even though there's no language, no words being used. I know Jeff has some thoughts around that, because it's something that we have to focus on in clinical practice or in any world, just showing up, creating the space, being present. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Well, you know what they say, that people may not remember what you said or what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I think just authentically being with the person makes a difference for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Allowing two people to connect, or people to connect in presence without language, just being there with someone is really impactful. I know go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, if I might add one thing to this part of the conversation, I think a lot of people, when it comes to emotion, which is a lot of what we're discussing here, people do two things that are deeply problematic, and there's a mindset shift that can help us overcome those two things. I think a lot of us in interactions are very busy when it comes to emotion, both for ourselves and for those that we're interacting with. We're busy categorizing and judging emotion. And categorizing is this good emotion? Is this bad emotion? Should I be feeling this? Should I not be feeling this? I have a friend who says we should on ourselves all the time. Mm-hmm. I should do this, I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So we're categorizing it, and then we're judging it. Why am I feeling this way? I shouldn't be nervous. Why am I so anxious at this? I shouldn't feel this way. Well, we have feelings because we have bodies. We have feelings because we have neurotransmitters. We have hormones. We have experiences that get filtered through our beliefs, our attitudes, our values, our prior knowledge, our neuroanatomy, and then it pops out the other end as a neurochemical hormonal thing called a feeling. And in the moment that we're feeling it, it's just as physiologically real as if someone had a fractured femur. Now, if you had a femur fracture and you were in a big old cast, if that was me and you knew that I love snow skiing, which is true, if you walked up to me and said, Eric, take the stupid cast off. It's all in your head. Let's go up to the mountain. Well, obviously that would be ludicrous, but we've all been angry before and had someone walk up who categorizes and judges emotion and says, now just calm down, which is decidedly unhelpful because it's robbing the person of an opportunity to have a very normal human experience called a feeling.
Right.
And so rather than categorizing and judging emotion, I think we get further when we observe and label. when we really see what's going on with ourselves and others. And our self-talk becomes something like, "Oh, I'm kind of gritting my teeth and I hardly noticed that. And my heart rate's a little elevated. My palms are sweaty. And oh, my sphincter muscle is tight.
Mhm.
I'm anxious here. What's going on here?"
Yeah.
I think we get further. It's like the psychologists of the world to say, when it comes to emotion, if you can name it, you tame it. Well, just naming it is powerful, and allowing other people to sit with whatever their emotional experience is, and not trying to talk them off the emotional ledge, but to just ask questions and to, like we said earlier, hold space for them
Yeah.
is far more productive. And it's part of what being fully present looks like.
Absolutely. Being present, creating the space for it to exist, create awareness around it, name it, and then you're able to work through it and to recognize it and to change and shift your way of being around it. Do I want to be angry in this moment, or do I want to shift and not be angry? You have that choice when you start to do the work to create awareness around it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Uh,
absolutely.
and I think furthermore, most humans interact with others based on what they perceive as justified, what is deserved.
Yeah,
And it's an entirely different thing to interact based on what would be helpful.
right. Absolutely. And so, in the going back to a Mind for All Seasons, you guys have developed an enhanced protocol, something that you guys utilize in your program, and it's highly personalized. It's science backed. But tell me a little bit about, like, what role does a person's way of being, like their mindset, their belief, their identity, everything about them, how does that play into their success with this sort of protocol, with this sort of intervention? How does that impact that?
Yeah, I love that question. Um, Corey, I would simply say that there's an art side to the equation of what we do,
Yeah,
and there's a science side to the equation. And you can think of the art side as the interpersonal side. Some people would say, "Oh, it's soft skills." I don't necessarily love that term, but that's
right.
kind of the idea. And uh, when it comes to participating in something like the enhanced protocol, we have to take into account things like a person's habits, their
I'm
attitude,
sure.
and their values. And we have to meet people where they are. So, just for context, the enhanced protocol is leveraging research from top neurologists and experts in neuroinflammation, and there's some real complexities to it. And there's a lot of objective things that we're measuring. We're trying to look at root cause factors that
Sure.
contribute to a person's cognitive and mental health. And often
Yeah.
that ties into lifestyle things that people might need to change. Like, let's talk about how to fuel your body differently. Let's
Yeah.
talk about becoming more physically active so that we can improve metabolic health and so that we can get blood flowing better. And I
Yeah.
could go down a long list of things that we have to pay attention to in the enhanced protocol. But ultimately, if someone is struggling to implement change in their life, then the art side of the equation and meeting them where they are and really listening, it gets us a lot further. And I
Absolutely.
think for years, I asked the wrong question. I think for
Yeah.
many years, I was asking the question, how do I get these people to do what they need to do? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of doctors ask that question. I have so many friends who do primary care
Yeah.
or geriatrics or whatever, and they say, "Man, if I could get my patients to do this thing, it would just make such a difference if I could just get them to be consistent with ABC."
Yeah.
I think that's the wrong question. I I don't think it's a terrible question, but I think it's less effective than asking the question, how could I create the conditions under which this person is more likely to choose to do
Yeah.
what would be helpful? That leads to different types of solutions. And it's that type of conversation that has led me when I'm meeting with people to ask more questions and to do some education, but then to sit with the information and to ask someone, what do you think would be helpful? If you were supporting a friend with these kinds of challenges,
Yeah.
Knowing everything that we just talked about, what would you recommend doing?
Yeah.
And when I hear that person provide the coaching as if they were going to coach their friend through the next right step, I hear them say what they need to do in their own life. And so I've heard people say things. I'll ask a question like, "Oh, if you're coaching your friend
Yeah.
through the struggle that you're facing to improve the diet, if that was their struggle, what do you think would be the most impactful thing that you would encourage that friend to do?" And they think for a minute and they say, if all I started with was to just ditch drinking soda every day and I drank water instead, or I got some tonic water and put some flavoring in it with a little stevia or something like that, so that I had a
Yeah.
little bit of fizz, but I didn't have all of the high fructose corn syrup or whatever. If I did that, I think that would be a good step. Well, it's different when I'm talking to someone and they volunteer that, and
Yeah.
then I say, "Well, how would you feel about trying that for a month yourself and just
Right.
seeing how you do?" Almost invariably, they come back and they say, "Actually, I think that's a really good idea. I think that's exactly what I'm going to do." I say,
Yeah.
"Great. How about you come to my office hours again next Tuesday? Tell me how it's going because I want to be a support to you. Sounds like that's really important to you." That's very different than, "Oh my gosh, you got to cut out your soda. It's
Absolutely.
killing you."
Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions we often ask in the being space is, who would I need to be? Who would I need to be to make that change, to do that in my life? Who would I need to be? How would I have to show up every day or in each moment to do that? Who would I need to be? So instead of asking, what do I need to have them do or what do I need to do? Who do I need to be in order to encompass health? Who do I need to be to change my diet? And when we're driven by who we are being, there's some long-lasting impacts of proceeding with that further and further down the road. And so, who are we being is often a question that we ask here.
I love that question, but I want to see if I can even change it just a little bit.
Sure.
Maybe even challenge it in some way. Because I love the concept of who am I being right now? How am I showing up in this moment? And I've encouraged a lot of people, even when I'm working with healthcare professionals as a college professor and
Yeah.
trying to help people. Hey, you're a master of nursing student or you're a master of social work student. You're going to show up with people. So let's talk about being fully present. And often I'll encourage them to take a moment before they step on stage, so to speak, before they walk in the room with somebody, and
Yeah.
just release any tension that they have. Do a few quick deep breaths and just clear the mind, and then set your intention and say, okay, if I was going to be the most effective occupational therapist in this moment, let's say, what would it look like? What would it sound
Right.
like? How would I feel? How would the other person feel? So I love that. And there's huge value in showing up that way. But I think there's something more even beyond it that goes beyond what are we being, and it's what are we becoming? Because most of us experience life looking retrospectively, and we use the past to define the present.
Right.
And everything about the story of the past informs how we view the current moment. And sometimes
Absolutely.
the current moment is really bad and it's hard. But it's an entirely different thing to focus on the future and what we're in the process of becoming. And we use that as the filter for the present. Because what that
Right.
means is we might be in a devastatingly difficult situation. But when we're looking to the future and we're really clear about what we're becoming, then this hard thing is really just part of the story that's going to make for a better story along the way. And that simple reframe changes a lot of things. I think it
Yeah.
allows us to show up with less fear. We're driven less by anxiety and more by full presence. I think we reframe anxiety as excitement. And when you look at the neurochemistry of anxiety and excitement, it's pretty much the same stuff. It's all how we think about it. There's
Yeah.
even social science research on that one. So I would just invite, in addition to thinking about how am I present, how am I being in this moment, can we add to it, and what am I becoming? And how does this moment and how I'm choosing to show up relate to what I'm becoming? instead of what I've been.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Who am I becoming, right? Who do I want to be into the future? That's not just in this moment, but into the future. And how do I want to approach every moment in the future? And I want to touch a little bit on something that you just said, because this is something that I find people, actually, I just want your strategy or some knowledge around this space. But you work closely with individuals that experience memory loss or cognitive shifts, or people who are just looking to enhance that space. But you said it just a minute ago. A lot of people living in, say, fear or limitations about the past and how it's impacting the present moment or the future. So how do you help people move from a place of fear or limitation to being someone of hope, possibility, and agency in the future? What do you have to say about that space?
I think fundamentally, I would sum up everything I'm going to tell you by saying, don't confuse what you feel with who you are.
Yes,
Very
absolutely.
different. But I want to share with you how I learned that, because I wish that was my idea. I'm actually quoting a client of mine from years ago when I learned this lesson. So this was a young woman whose father called me in great distress. And he's a friend, but he called and he said, Eric, I've seen the work that you guys are doing with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's patients, and you're helping them add like 10 points or more on a 30-point Montreal cognitive assessment in a matter of months by looking at root cause issues. And I know it's not a cure, but doggone it, you're helping people with Alzheimer's get better to a degree and reverse some degree of their symptoms. And if you can do that, surely you can help my daughter. And I said, what's going on? Well, he was crying at the time. I mean, this was a devastatingly difficult thing. His daughter was depressed and suicidal. And I said, help me understand what suicidal looks like in this case. And he said, well, we sent her on a trip abroad with an aunt and uncle to try to get her out of her funk because she'd been locking herself in her room day after day. And instead, they found her standing on top of a 14-story building ready to jump.
Oh, my.
Said, oh, my gosh, I'm so sorry. And even though he's a friend, I didn't know this daughter very well. She was old enough that she was supposed to be gone off at college, but she had come home. She was locking herself in a room. They'd been to all sorts of professionals trying to get help. They tried some really good things, but nothing was working for her. And he said, I just want you to try. And part of me was really hesitant because we weren't doing anything with pediatrics.
Yeah.
And my business partner, our CMO, was like, we don't do peds, Eric. I mean, in my private mental health practice, I see younger patients, but we don't do that. And I said, hey, this is a friend, and I'm sorry. I already said we'll try, because they're at the end of their rope. And he said, okay, whatever. So to condense the story a little bit, number one, we found that she was dealing with post-concussion syndrome, among other things. She played high school rugby and lacrosse, and she'd never been diagnosed with a concussive injury. But when we did an eye tracking test with a device that has a laser that tracks eye movement 100 times a second, oh my goodness, her saccades were messed up, her horizontal pursuits and vertical pursuits and circular smooth pursuits. They were atrocious. There were all kinds of things goofed up in her eye tracking. And we said, you look like some of the NFL players that we've seen. And she said, I've never been diagnosed with a concussion. So we started digging into that. We also looked at some genetic factors. We looked at nutrients and hormones and inflammatory markers. We found some key things that were off. She had a couple of SNPs on the MTHFR gene. So she was a poor methylator, and she had really suboptimal B12 and folate levels and high homocysteine. We said, okay, well, there's some low-hanging fruit. So we started working through all this stuff, trying to be really thorough. And her symptoms started to improve pretty dramatically. And she still had this cyclic nature to her mental health, where she'd have a good week, and then maybe another good week, and then at some point she'd start to just unravel a little bit. But she got better enough that she was able to go back to college. And one week on a call with her, she wasn't having the best week. And I asked her about it because she was approaching it differently. It didn't seem to be rocking her world so badly. And I said, help me understand that. Even though you're not doing quite as well as last time I talked to you, you seem more resilient. And she said, Eric, I've come to recognize that what I'm feeling is just a symptom. That's
Yeah.
not who I am. What I feel is totally different than who I am. And I don't have to like what I'm feeling, but it's a symptom. And I understand that when we're treating the symptoms really well, I get to feel better. And so I don't freak out over it. I just ask myself, well, what's changed? What's
Right.
going on? Now, quick end of the story that's kind of cool. A year into this, my partner, Randy, was meeting with her in a telemedicine consult. And she was saying that, this isn't such a good week. And on top of it, I have cold sores. And he said, wait a minute. How did we not know that you have cold sores? And she said, well, my dad's a dentist and he knows that I get cold sores all the time. I've got this one spot on my upper lip that feels like it's almost always ready to erupt. So he just gave me a prescription of valcyclovir and I just use it when I feel something coming on. And sometimes I get them in my nose and you can't really see them. I've never told you before. Why? Is it important? And Randy said, well, it's a little bit theoretical, but lots of Alzheimer's patients that donate their brains to science are found to have herpes simplex virus living in the brain. And we know that a lot of the cells in your brain are immune cells of one sort or another. And when the immune system flares, energy production drops, and that can happen in a localized area.
Right.
So it's possible that maybe you got a leaky blood-brain barrier and you've got herpes simplex virus sitting on the trigeminal nerve. It's climbed up into the brain. And when your immune system can't quite stay ahead of that, it flares and you get symptoms. She said, that sounds awful. What would we do about it? And he said, how about we pretend that you've got genital herpes, because we would never want that to flare. And we would put you on a prophylactic dose of valcyclovir every day.
Right.
And he said, oh, is it safe? And he said, yeah, actually, I think so. Let's add some lysine and let's do this. Here's the end of the story. Her mental health completely leveled out. And now here we are a few years later. She's married. She just told me a week ago she's expecting her first child. She works at a concussion clinic as a manager. She graduated from college, moved on with life. She's really focused on trying to help other people that have sustained concussive injuries. And she no longer meets the DSM criteria for a bipolar diagnosis. She's off all of her mental health medications and super stable and doing really, really well. But it was her that taught me, don't confuse what you feel with who you are. And I have leveraged that so often in helping people understand what they're going through and to not get confused with this whole fight that I think was created by the fact that we have a healthcare system and we have a mental health care system, as if everything stopped at the neck, as if everything wasn't deeply interconnected.
Yeah, and that's what we're here to discuss, is the interconnectedness of all of this, right? That was a brilliant story to describe exactly why, we're having these conversations, because it is all interconnected to heal and to our health. And so, Jeff, what do you think about that story? What are your thoughts on that?
I love that story.
It's great.
Brilliant client to come up with that we are not, I am not my feelings. I don't know if you know who Devin Bandison is, but he has a distinction called feeling being. And a lot of times we as human beings just show up being our feelings and justified. And there's a story. It's rational. It's reasonable. I have every reason to be upset. So who I'm showing up in the world right now is being upset, as an example, and just recognizing that those are my feelings and I don't need to be those feelings. I can take a step back and consciously create who I'm being is super useful.
Yeah, absolutely. So this particular client, your feelings are not who you are. Is there a component of the program that you offer where you coach or you take them through a process of discovering who they are?
Yes. And I would sum up by saying, really, the magic of what we do is in coaching.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's meeting people where they are and providing the guidance and the insight and the coaching necessary. There's not a formal piece of it. There's not a checkbox with what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Really, it's more about truly trying to listen to each individual,
Yeah.
meet them where they are, and help them see things in productive new ways,
Mm-hmm.
that enlarge their vision and empower them to see themselves in a new light. And that's where a lot of the joy is found. That's why I absolutely love what I do. And I'm excited to get out of bed every day and to go try to make a difference. And when people say, well, Eric, when are you going to retire? What are your plans? You're going to sell your business? And I honestly say, I hope I can work till the day I die, because if I'm having this much fun, why would I ever want to stop that?
Absolutely. Yeah. That story that you just shared with us is a perfect example of just being present with someone, to listen, and to, the importance of slowing down and being present to listen so that you can hear what's going on for the other person. I mean, that subtle conversation, well, it wasn't a subtle conversation, but this subtle comment around, I have cold sores, and he could have just moved on from it. He could have just shifted into a different topic, into a different, question, but he didn't. He was present and he was listening to her. And that created the space for him to investigate and to get curious about something, which then led to further healing for that patient. I just absolutely think that was a brilliant story.
Yeah, I give Randy so much credit, not only in this situation, but he is very good at listening to people intently. I think that's really one of his superpowers.
Yeah.
That and the fact that he has a deep appreciation for the fact that the body is a system of systems. And although there's huge value in specialization with an organ system,
Yeah.
if we neglect the fact that everything works with everything else, then I think we're missing something.
Yeah. I think I would agree with you. We're missing that big picture, that system of systems approach. Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, for example, that if someone, let's say someone's at their psychiatrist's office and they say, I saw a podcast where this doctor was talking about his research into the gut microbiome. And he mentioned that 95% or so of our serotonin is made in the gut. And I've got chronic gut health issues. Do you think that that's contributing to my depression? Well, we all know that the psychiatrist is likely to say, oh, you've got gut health issues? Well, I can refer you to the gastroenterologist.
Absolutely.
And conversely, if you're at the gastroenterologist's office and you talk about your mental health symptoms, you're likely to get a referral to the psychiatrist. But unless we see how all of the pieces actually work together, then we might stay stuck and miss something. But asking new questions and trying to see things in a more systems focused way, I think is valuable.
Absolutely. I take a lot of students over the years and worked with a lot of folks. And I always jokingly say in medicine, there's always at least two specialties that you practice. The first one is the one that you're in, whatever specialty that is. In my case, it was orthopedics. And the second specialty is always psychiatry or psychology. It is a factor in everywhere. And so systems of systems. And so I know, Jeff, that shows up for you in your practice, in your orthopedic practice, practicing the specialty of orthopedics, but then other specialties creep in there. How do you approach from your practice that systems of systems mentality?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a well-formed answer to that, but it's brilliantly stated that it all matters and everything's connected. And for certain, being with the person and hearing what's really happening for them, we have what objectively looks like two similar scenarios, and they're showing it completely differently for the two different patients. Yeah. There's something outside of the worn out knee that's causing that experience for them. And attempting to get access to that is useful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Eric, I want to shift us just a little bit into, your your career as an administrator in long-term care and in those ways, but even with your own staff currently, how do you cultivate kind of a way of being among your staff or the support folks for the people that you're working with around, kind of how do you cultivate that way of being where they can show up with dignity, compassion, and connection with the people that they serve or take care of? Any insights to that?
Yeah, I think we could talk a lot about that, but two things initially really come to mind as I think about it. The first is maybe best illustrated by an experience from the Olympics years ago when Usain Bolt won yet another race and set a world record. But the two runners that came in second and third also broke the world record.
Yeah.
And when they were interviewed later about it, they were asked, did you know that you were on pace to break the world record? And they both independently said, no, we were just trying to catch Usain. And I think humans generally don't go as fast as we can go. We go as fast as the leader goes.
Yeah.
And I think part of what you're asking, Corey, is a question of culture. And culture is nothing more than people.
Right.
And so it's been said that true leaders are inspiring because they are inspired. And so if we're looking to improve the quality of the team and how they show up, I think the very first thing to do from a diagnostic perspective is to look in the mirror and say, well, how am I showing up? What is my behavior communicating? Because nobody's going to go faster than I go.
Right.
Nobody's going to do things unless I'm demonstrating it. And that means I've got to be out there in front showing what really matters. So I think that's one thing. The second thing that I'd say in answer to your question really relates to something that I've trained literally thousands of professionals in. Gosh, I've been on stages in 39 of the 50 states teaching this stuff. It's the very first thing that I teach a healthcare professional as far as the interpersonal side of things. When it comes to interaction, I think there are 5 key principles that really help us have good interactions. And the first thing that I teach is to terminate the task trap. I think one of the biggest problems that we face in healthcare is the task trap, which is what happens if we go straight to the task and we skip step 1 in every human interaction, which is to make a meaningful connection with the other person.
Right.
It's institutionalized in healthcare. So think, for example, about long-term care or someone that is staying in the hospital. When someone needs assistance with activities of daily living or things that they're being monitored for in the hospital, all of a sudden you get checklists, you get lists of tasks, you get care plans. Well, let's imagine that I wrote a care plan for you, Corey, and you, Jeff, and for me. Our care plans would basically say the same thing: independent in bathing, independent in dressing, independent in ambulation, independent in feeding themselves. Our care plans would look very, very similar, but we're entirely different people.
Yes.
That's because who we are is largely what happens after our ADLs get performed. And yet institutionally in long-term care, everything that you're regulated by centers on, did you get the care plan done? Did you give people their pills on time? We've deluded ourselves into thinking if you keep people clean and dry and seasonally appropriate clothing and you give them 3 square meals and you give them their medications on time, you've done something amazing and you deserve 5 gold stars. And yet for you and me, that would represent an absolute bare minimum day, because who we are is what happens after those things are accomplished. Our identity is separate to a great extent from ADLs and even the preferences that we have. Who cares what shampoo we prefer? We get up, we get ready, and we get out the door to go choose to be who we are. And if you treat someone in a way different than how they see themselves, it's a disaster. It was Abraham Lincoln who said tact is the ability to describe others as they see themselves. And to further elaborate on this idea, you would never open the front door if you heard a knock at your door. If there was a complete stranger, you'd never open the door and say, hey, come on in. And if you opened the door to a complete stranger and said, may I help you? If they just barged right through the door and walked in your house, you'd be more than a little bit upset. That would be a really bad situation. But interpersonally, I fear that many of us in healthcare fall right into the task trap because we start defining success as doing all the stuff on the care plan, delivering everything that's on their orders when we should, and we fail to do the very first thing, which is to actually make a meaningful connection with someone.
Yeah.
And obviously that's going to look different to someone living with advanced dementia versus someone who's cognitively very capable. But you need to build some trust because we allow people that we know, like, and trust to assist us all the time, but we don't let complete strangers help us. So I think intentionally teaching that again and again and again has made a difference in my work. And so many of the problems that we deal with are really just the task trap. We're treating people as objects, not as humans. And if I kick an object, it'll go in whatever direction I kick it. If you kick a person, they're going to kick you back.
Right.
If you're treating someone as an object, they're either an obstacle in your path, they're a vehicle that you're using for some selfish purpose, or they're irrelevant to you. None of those are a good option for a human being.
Right. Yeah, we do get into a task trap, the checklist, which is what we're scored on in medicine most of the time, the healthcare facilities, right? And it's quite honestly, at most times, the wrong scorecard. I mean, those things do matter. They really do matter, but there's a whole nother level, whole nother layer of things that truly, truly make a difference that matter beyond just the checklist.
And isn't it sad that if you as a physician think twice, or that you might be triggered to think twice about being a little bit bold with someone, because if it's in the back of your head, what's that going to do to my Press Ganey scores and my reimbursements and all this? That's a little tricky. That's hard to navigate.
That is, yeah.
It seems like some of that is the business of medicine. You know, that quote misattributed to Peter Drucker, if it can't be measured, it can't be managed. Well, I think Corey and I believe that things that really matter can't be measured.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or aren't being measured properly or accordingly currently. Yeah.
I agree it's hard to quantify, but I also think that in any individual situation, if we're really listening, we can have a sense as a human being as to whether or not we're moving in the right direction or not. We might not be able to quantify everything about it, but I do think we can tell the trajectory that we're on with other people and whether things are improving in some way. And that does matter.
Absolutely. That does matter for sure. And speaking of going in a particular direction, you guys at A Mind for Every Season have challenged kind of the passive wait and see approach to brain health and cognitive health. And from your perspective, how can clinicians, families, how can they choose their being differently to create a different outcome when it comes to their brain health? What can they do? Who do they need to be? How would you encourage them to take a new direction?
I love that question. Thank you for that. I really think that it starts with just learning and thinking about one key thing. When we have an appreciation for the fact that neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's often starts 20 plus years, at least pathologically, it's starting decades before symptoms show up, then we can embrace the idea that it's far easier to prepare and prevent than it is to repair and repent. I think the absolute best way to treat Alzheimer's disease is to not get it in the first place. And even the most conservative estimates out there nowadays are that we could be preventing at least 40% of the cases. And some physicians say we could prevent 90+% of the cases of a disease like Alzheimer's. That's the largest the largest contributor to neurodegenerative disease and dementia on the planet. So why would we not move upstream? And when we have an appreciation of something like that, we start to reframe things. I know far too many situations, many hundreds of them over the years, where I have talked to a family about their journey through our healthcare system, and they started to have a sense very early on that things were slipping. And eventually, many of them courageously went to the doctor. Maybe they took a loved one with them, and they sat down with their primary care provider and said, I don't think I'm doing so well. And the doctor said, well, you are getting older. So we've confused what is common with normal. Progressive memory loss, that's common. We now know it's not normal. That's not the normal path for the brain if it's healthy. Yes, we age. Yes, things do change. But progressive memory loss, that's not normal. So pat on the head from some people. Oh, you're getting older. Maybe we do a dementia screening test, which is a very broad-toothed comb. You're only catching things when they're decades downstream. And people have been told, well, you don't have dementia. So I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. and then they go back home, and then a couple of years go by and they go back, and then they take that dementia screener again, and maybe they score 23 out of 30, and they're diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. But nobody explains to people that the mild refers to the degree that it disrupts your abilities to take care of your activities of daily living. And mild cognitive impairment is kind of like saying someone has stage 3 cancer. We're talking about advanced disease by the time someone is diagnosable at that level.
Yeah.
And we don't take it seriously. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I only have mild cognitive impairment. Are you kidding me? We should do more. We can do more. So I think just learning to see those things and to really respect what people are saying and realize that what the data shows in the research is that 80% of the time when someone has subjective cognitive impairment, if you have a patient come in and say, I think I'm slipping, 80% of the time, they're right.
Yeah.
I think we need to take a deep breath and just listen a little bit more.
Absolutely. Wow, I love that. So obviously, well, not obviously, but your recommendation would be to screen and to do the tests, the simple screening tests that you guys offer that people can do and kind of get a baseline of where they're at.
Yeah, there are more advanced tests that could be done. For example, we use a test called CNS vital signs that has been administered over 20 million times in the last 2 decades. So there's a lot of data points to compare to. It's used in a lot of research institutions to try to quantify things, and it's a much finer tooth comb. We can see cognitive decline many years before it would show up on a dementia screener. And some people say, I don't think I want to know about that. Well, if there was nothing you could do, I would agree. But the reality is there's a lot you can do. I see it every day. We could talk for hours about clinical experience and what we see that improves cognitive scores. But I've watched people, one guy, 62 years old, came in a few years ago with early onset Alzheimer's disease. His composite memory score was in the 8th percentile. And 4 months later, with aggressive treatment of root cause issues, he scored in the 92nd percentile. And he had 3 different neurologists do a thorough review and diagnose him with early onset Alzheimer's. But when we dealt with root cause issues, he still had the disease, but he was living a very different kind of a life because there's more that can be done.
Yeah. When you start looking at the whole person, the wholeness of what that patient is, and start to addressing those root cause issues, shifts their entire experience completely.
Yeah. Eric, you made me curious. Brilliant. You're brilliant. I appreciate you being on the show. You acknowledged your partner and his superpower of listening. Curious, what are your superpowers?
Ooh, I love that.
I think the most significant thing I've learned about myself over time is that somehow I've been able to combine a deep-seated curiosity that's never gone away with the ability to make connections from one field to another or one way of thinking to another that allows me to explain things in a way that the layperson can really understand. And I find myself in the enjoyable position of being able to talk to clinicians. If we want to get into science and talk specific neurotransmitters and some of the details, I'm really comfortable with that and I love that. But if I'm talking to someone that doesn't even really understand what metabolism means, I'm really comfortable having that conversation. And I think I have a superpower of finding the right analogy to help something come alive. And I've learned how to teach with stories because stories are sticky and they resonate. They help people wrap their heads around things. And I think that's important because people deeply want to understand how their body works or how something that they're dealing with works. And for far too long, I think people of all different backgrounds academically have wanted to arrogantly sit on their high tower and know some things that no one else can know. And it's good if you just have to trust me, but I think we do people a greater service when we help them understand what they want to know, because the reality is nobody's ever going to care about your body more than you do. No one's ever going to care about my body more than I do. And I want to know as much as I can about how it works, because I'm the one that gets to live in this body for the rest of my life.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it.
That's absolutely brilliant, Eric. Thank you. Where can people find you? Where can people go to get more information? Sure.
I think the best place is www.amindforallseasons.com. And we have lots of resources there, many things that are completely free. I've done a daily video called the Caregiver Minute for many years. There's over 1,400 episodes of the Caregiver Minute, where we just take 3 to 5 minutes and talk about one principle of how to interact with someone, or one thing about the latest scientific research, and explain it in a way that anybody can understand. We've got a newsletter that you could sign up for there. There's a free brain health assessment that looks at lifestyle factors, symptomatic factors, and then even some biomarkers. If you've had a little bit of blood work done, you could go to mindforallseasons.com/energy and take a completely free brain health assessment and just get a sense of what might be going really well for you and what might be some areas that you could consider improving.
Awesome. Well, I encourage everyone to go check it out, because there's a great amount of information on the website, and what you guys are doing is extremely important. And I just want to acknowledge you and everyone over there at A Mind for All Seasons for being present and taking care of folks in the way that they deserve, and looking at them as that system within a system, and looking and caring for them for who they wholly are as a human being. So just want to acknowledge you for all the great work that you're doing over there, Eric.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for that.
And really appreciate you being on today. Just wonderful conversation from the beginning, from categorizing and judging our feelings to observing and labeling, and, who am I becoming, and all of the things that we discussed today. So I just really want to thank you for being on, and appreciate you. And we'll have to have you back, because I'm sure we just scratched the surface of what we could explore with you. So thank you, Eric, for being here. Thank you, Jeff, for participating. And any last words, Eric, that you want to share with the audience that maybe we didn't get to?
I would just remind people that it's far easier to prepare and prevent than it is to repair and repent. So I invite you to leave the sick care system. Don't wait until the wheels fall off the bus and hope there's an answer. Let's be proactive, and let's focus on being well.
Absolutely. Well said, Eric. Thank you for being here. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in for another episode of Being in Medicine. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today on the Being in Medicine show, where each week we open the transformative power of connecting our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual nature to how we show up in medicine.
If you find this conversation valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you or someone you know has a story to share, contact us at beinginmedicine.com. See you next time.